Hey there, thank you for joining me today. Something that I've seen quite a bit over the past few months is a lot of people asking for tips and advice to get their kids into, more specifically, like miniature games, tabletop games, but also things like D&D and other RPG games as well. Finally, I feel like I have something that I am confident enough to bring to the table. So, without further ado, let's just jump right into it. Here are my personal tips and my personal approach in regards to teaching my kids things like wargaming and tabletop gaming in general. Really quick, a little bit about me. I am a father of 4. My eldest child is 9 years old, and my youngest is 3 going on 4. So basically, you could say that I'm like in it right now. And I hope that at the very least that makes my tips that much more helpful because of the fact that I'm focusing on younger children. So right off the bat, let's talk math. In my opinion, if your kid is able to add and subtract up to about between 20 and 30, they're more than likely ready to start playing miniature games of several different kinds. My son is in 1st grade. He knows how to play onepagerules pretty well. My eldest child is 9 years old, and they know how to build their own army list and how to make sure that they can essentially min-max their options. Most of the games that we play really use no more than a D20 system of some sort. So that's why I feel pretty confident in saying if your kid can subtract or add up to about 20 to 30, they're ready to at the very least start picking units and measuring things and rolling the dice. I don't know if I'd really consider that a tip. That's more of a personal opinion, but I guess we'll consider it a bonus tip. But first, actual tip: start small. Now, many of us love the look and love the overall theme and gameplay and feel of giant war games, but we're playing with kids, so just keep it small. This is why I highly suggest starting them with, skirmish games or more cooperative based games which focus on storytelling. Really good examples of this are going to be Rangers of Shadow Deep, 5 Parsecs, the later Stargrave campaigns, things like that, where, once again, more of a focus on story and just kind of having fun, no focus on competition really. This also allows you and your kids to really make it a lot more personal. You guys can, come up with a squad together, come up with the whole backstory. If you are into world building, to be quite frank, you can use this to test out certain things. You can use it to really just flesh it out and use the imagination of a child to help really make it run wild. But we're not here to use our kids for content, and at least not like that. And also the biggest thing about sticking with smaller skirmish-sized games is that it's going to be a lot easier to remember who is who. That is definitely, I think, the hardest part about even doing small to mid-sized wargaming is a lot of the, wait a minute, who was that? Who did that? What did they do again? But to also piggyback off of starting small, this goes actually right into my second tip, where you let them create their own squad. It's pretty obvious, and it's probably the intro rule to, at the very least, gauging your kids' interest in something like wargaming or just tabletop gaming in general. Show them the different factions, show them the different races, the different characters that they can create, and let them pick out 5 people. Let them pick out their names. Let them pick out how they all know each other. And you're right off to the races. Because sometimes just trying to come up with a whole bunch of different characters can be a whole daunting activity within itself. Let them pick out their minis too. If you are wanting to be a bit more frugal, if they have smaller toys, whether it be Lego figurines, action figures, or what have you, just let them pick it out. Try to keep everything within the same scale if possible, but don't stress it too much. If it's something that's going to help them remember who their different people actually are and help them remember what about each of them is special in regards to different abilities or equipment, things like that. Let them just use whatever they want. That's probably the hardest thing that it took for me to get over, was trying and stressing about making sure that everything was in the same scale, or stuff about making sure the bases were the right size. Just don't worry about it. Something I feel like I say in all of the videos I've done so far about this. GW and the wargaming YouTube community are not going to come down and laugh at you, full Nelson haha months. Tip 3, actually teaching the game. Simplify the rules. Feel free to give it a good butchering, but not to the point that you're playing a different game. I would think and hope, depending on your game of choice, you know it well enough that at the very least you can kind of just take away the rules that you don't like or you're not the most familiar with and keep just the core mechanics. For example, I always suggest that the first game or the first few games be king of a hill or a single objective type of deal. A lot of people just recommend doing free-for-all, last man standing, but first off, that will end up getting kind of boring very quickly from the times that I've done it. And second off, we're trying to teach the most common mechanic in all these games, which is more often than not taking and holding an objective or doing something in regards to an objectives. It gives them at least a clear goal to keep in mind that's a little bit more focused than just kill everybody. And with things like activations and actions themselves, I like to keep it pretty simple to just move and shoot, or move and fight. In most of these games, that's what you're going to do 9 out of 10 times, is move and try to shoot at someone, or move to try to punch someone in the face. So just keep it that simple. So I'm more than fine, and I'm a huge advocate of at least keeping a basic set of modifiers. No pun intended, but try to keep it in regards to the lowest common denominator. I really wouldn't do much more than just adding some defense or adding to a quality number if your person or squad is hiding behind cover, or maybe giving the person firing a +1 or whatever because they're shooting from higher up. That way, once again, you are encouraging the thought and use of more tactical thinking. So I think that a good reason to use the basic modifier system is because while you are still teaching, things like terrain rules and navigating the battlefield to your advantage or to your opponent's disadvantage, you're also at the same time, and the biggest thing that I try to focus on with my kids, you're keeping them thinking tactically and objectively in regards to the mission at hand. Obviously, I say keep the rules for line of sight, keep the rules for unit coherency, just because that seems completely fair to me. And especially when you are doing larger scale war games, you want to show that your group of miniatures represents a cohesive group. For the special rules for individual units and things like that, I would definitely try to explain them, maybe pick out 1 or 2 that make the special faction or group or person stand out a bit more, especially in regards to things like healing abilities, support abilities, things maybe more on the defensive side. But I also really like playing with supports, so I'm a little bit biased. This might be a little bit of a hot take, but I say completely just get rid of morale or routing or whatever you want to call it. The mechanic where basically after a certain point you have to start seeing if your units or your people run away from the battlefield. I feel like that it is just very unexciting and just a complete momentum killer. I can't think of a much more anticlimactic way to end the game than to just be like, okay, it's down to the wire and everybody ran away. Well, I won. Okay, bye. I don't know. Like I said, this might be controversial, but I just never understood the morale system or the routing system or anything along those lines. Making people scatter, it makes sense thematically, but mechanically, As much as I love the excitement that it brings, No random events, no building destruction, no terrain effects, things like difficult terrain, stuff of that nature. No battlefield conditions, no victory points. None of all that fluff. I mean, the real obvious reason is because people already complained enough about 9th edition being overly bloaty. Why would you do that to a child? Once again, we're just trying to play some games with our kids. We're just trying to throw some dice with our kids. So just keep that in mind. Now, I'm sure that there are a lot of you that at this point have realized, hey, this kind of just seems like one-page rules, you know, which is Warhammer, but without all the bloat. And yeah, you're right. I honestly never would have started this journey if I hadn't found out about one-page rules. And they're not the sponsor of this video. That would be awesome, but I'm quite aware of the size of my channel, so, you know, it's one day. I know a lot of like older and more hardcore Warhammer players kind of feel like one-page rules is way too simple. That's gonna be the game that you want to play to get your kids into Warhammer or something like Kill Team. You're gonna want them to play one-page rules because it did a perfect job of streamlining just about everything. And on top of that, once you get the hang of it, once you want to start adding more piecemeal stuff, just sign up for the Patreon or get the advanced rule set, which does have things like random events, battlefield conditions, building damage, a whole bunch of different extra actions that we're gonna kind of briefly go over here later. I can't think of a better, I would say, higher shelf war game that does a good job of just distilling the whole experience and still giving you the customization and flexibility that you want. So, one-page rules. Keep your eye on me. All right, so my favorite tip on this list, and I think the one that is the most important, especially in regards to just kind of teaching kids how to think like a tabletop player, whether that be a tabletop RPG player or a wargaming player, is you need to learn how to summon and harness your inner anime tournament arc commentator voice. It seems a little weird, but hear me out. In most anime, gotta do a dad switch. Alright, well, so back in my day, in most animes that we watched, they had what they would call a tournament arc. We're talking shonen battle anime. So in most of these shonen battle animes, there would be, for some inexplicable reason, there'd be a fighting tournament where all the protagonists, antagonists, and literally the bad guy that's trying to kill the whole world will all come together and do an organized fighting tournament. And in these battles, the commentator somehow has the ability to know exactly who is doing what, why they're doing it, and what the end result's gonna be. Pokemon battles are actually another good example of this.
Ash thought he might need Muck during this match, so he called me yesterday and asked me to transport it here. He knew Muck had an advantage over grass-type Pokemon.
I don't believe it's true. He's going to attempt the darkness technique.
The darkness? What does that mean?
Dragon of the what, sir?
Dragon of the darkness flame. It's incredibly dangerous. My father talked of it once, but I didn't think anyone could do it.
So, for example, let's just say I'm taking Tondolito here, and I'm going to move him inside this building. And he's going to go around the corner and post up and be looking at the window for anyone that comes by that isn't on his team. And what's going to happen is when they come by, he's going to try to shoot them. I just gave a very overly flowery explanation of how Overwatch would work. On top of that, first off, it's just fun. Second off, it's something that's going to feel very weird at first. Just saying, okay, this guy's gonna go here and do this, so that maybe the next turn he can try to capture the point. So not only are you doing something which folds into tip 5, which is thinking out loud and explaining your logic, This gives you a chance to kind of do 2 in 1. First off, your kid will probably think it's pretty entertaining, bringing out your inner WWE commentator. My God, he's on the ropes. Oh my God, what a powerful slam against the melee opponent. Oh man, that orc had a family. What I also like doing about this as well is the fact that it helps my kids kind of see how I approach either doing a certain strategy or how I approach interacting with a certain team or faction or whatever. Being able to think out loud, being able to kind of paint the story for them, kind of make them a little bit aware of the moves that I'm trying to set up on the chessboard of sci-fi. It gives them the chance to come up with their own counter strategies. It allows them to be clever on their own and to think about ways that they could do something like get you in a trap, take a point back from you, causing you to stretch yourself out thin. And if your child seems stuck and they quite blatantly do not know what to do, just tell them what you would do and tell them why. Maybe give them a couple different suggestions. Once again, we're just playing with our kids. I feel like I need to keep reiterating that, but I know that there are going to be some parents that get a little bit lost in the sauce. We're just playing with kids. So just tell them what you would do. Give them a little bit of an advantage. Give them some really good options. And, if you want to be a little bit of a jerk, give them 2 good options and 1 bad one and see what happens. Maybe they'll learn from it. So for tip number 5, I am going to say, if possible, nerf yourself. Do what you can to basically underpower yourself as much as possible, but you still get to have fun. Easiest way to do this would be just play a faction you don't normally play. Play a army you have little to no experience with. So that way, while you're stumbling through their abilities, getting their flow, trying to figure out what you can do, you are essentially putting yourself on the same foot as your child. This will actually be a great way for you to make sure that you know all the rules for your respective game, but also that you can kind of put yourself in the shoes of being a new player again. You might end up having to reference, certain rules or interpreting the rule book a certain way because of the fact that you are playing it from a completely different angle and from a completely different point of view. Have fun with that. Use that ability, maybe make like a little bit of like a meme composition, do a group of just like all melee, a group of all healers or something stupid like that. So something that I like to do is basically just run a whole bunch of little grots, Gretchens, whatever, couple of orc leaders, and just basically go full Zerg rush, but it'd be more of a green rush. Have a whole bunch of little guys that are running around trying to retake the means of production, if you know what I'm saying. I think that it is hilarious. I think it's a lot of fun. They only hit on 5s and 6s, so they're gonna get slaughtered pretty quickly, but at the same time it's also really fun to see the look on my kid's face when they have their dinosaur riding a dinosaur, doing a large tail swipe, and taking out like a good 5-6 little gremlins out of a squad of 10. That's fun for everyone. That is peak fiction, if I may say so. All right, number 6. So I know that earlier I said take out all of the extra actions. Well, now I'm gonna say, start including a couple extra actions. So I am a really big fan of the XCOM Revival series, the one that pretty much just got killed recently with Firaxis, Jake Solomon leaving. So because of that, the Overwatch action from XCOM is pretty much a staple in all of my games. That is my homebrew if it's not included in some form or fashion. I'm just so used to Overwatch, it makes too much sense to me. I also think that doing things like suppression fire in order to have a certain target have a hard time hitting, or hunkering down to get extra defense, things like that, I have no problem with. To me, those actions make sense in the scheme of playing a game and the gameplay loop of a match. But I definitely say when you're starting to teach, your kids how to just play the game in general, don't worry about all that. After they have a couple games, once they can do a very basic game by themselves and you guys can knock it out in about hour and a half, then that is when I would start folding in more of these rules. Oh, hey, look at that. We're on tip 7. The final tip. As you play more of these games, as you play just more games in general, just fold in those rules. You know, maybe if you really feel confident, every game, every other game, I would definitely make sure at the very least they should understand their faction or their army or their squad. They should know that pretty well before worrying about terrain and extra rules and hunkering down and Overwatch. But I'm not your kid's dad, at least I hope not. You know them better than I do, so I trust you on that. If you're watching me, I trust your judgment. So I will say, when I started trying to learn Warhammer itself, the actual full 40k experience, I was subscribed to the Indominus subscription box thingy. Essentially what it was a way for you to get a whole bunch of Warhammer miniatures and paints and a lot of like pretty dang good starting material for a reasonably cheaper discount over the period of like a year and a half. So you would get a handful of miniature, or you get a couple of sprues, maybe some paint and a brush, and then you would get like a handful of just loose sheets that would have literally maybe like the first 3 or 4 rules of playing Warhammer itself. And then as you got more of the pieces and you started having these 2 armies, they would start expanding in the rules and introducing more things, introducing terrain and introducing things like morale and melee and all that other fun stuff. So despite the fact it was expensive as hell, it was actually a really good way to have somebody realize over the course of a year and a half that they ended up having a several $100 Warhammer collection just building right under their nose. From a business standpoint, it's pretty genius, I'm not gonna lie. The whole point of all that was that it was a really good way to actually slowly introduce new players into everything Warhammer. It was almost like put yourself in the deep end, and with that whole frog boiling metaphor thing, which is apparently nonsense anyways, you put yourself in the pot and you would let Games Workshop just slowly crank up the heat until the point that, like I said, you had like close to 2,000 points in Space Marines and Necrons. But yeah, that's all that I have right now. I feel pretty good about the tips that I have shared. If you have any yourself that I haven't gone over, or you have any feedback or any thoughts, you know, just leave them down below. You know, I always appreciate hearing what you guys think of my stuff, and that's the only way I'm gonna get better. If you want to see more, like and subscribe. I will say I like talking about wargaming and stuff like that a lot, but that's not the only thing I'm going to talk about. So if you're okay with that, if you just want to hear my dad point of view for things like analog games, video games, movies, comics, stuff like that, I'm a nerd of all trades and a expert of none. So yeah, that's what I plan to do with this channel. So if that sounds fun to you, if you want to get in on this hype train early, you know, hit me with a like, and I will try to put my socials around here somewhere. But yeah, just whatever social you use, you can probably find me there, and hit me up and we'll chat. And if you have anything you want me to talk about, let me know. And I will see you in the next one, whatever it is, whenever it is. All right, bye.